and welcome to my next video tutorial, which is going to be focused on deploying a Django web application to DigitalOcean. So there's quite a lot of steps here that I'm going to go through, but let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing that you'd want to do is you want to head on over to digitalocean.com and you want to sign up for a DigitalOcean account. Now, there are some details that you need to add in, so do keep that in mind here. So there are a few ways in which you can start the sign up. So you can either sign up with email, Google, or with GitHub. I'd recommend going with GitHub because we are going to later on in this video go ahead and utilize GitHub for our source control. So the choice is yours as to how you want to proceed here. Now, there will be details, like I mentioned later on, that you will go ahead and set up. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so go ahead and choose one of the following. Okay, once you've done that, we can go ahead and continue with the next part in this video, and that's just to prepare our application for deployment. Okay, so once you've created everything with DigitalOcean, let's continue. So the next thing you need to ensure is that you have a Django project that you want to actually deploy and utilize. And as you can see, I have a very simple one here. So on this one that I have here, I can, of course, register, log in, and create an account. So it's a very simple CRUD application. And let's go ahead with the finer details now. Now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to ensure that we have GUnicorn within our application. This is going to ensure that our Django application will be able to communicate with the servers behind the scenes on DigitalOcean. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we can head on over to our terminal where our project is located, and we can just go ahead and say pip install GUnicorn or GUnicorn. So that's the first thing that we want to do. Okay, so it's just going to take a moment to do that, and there we go. Perfect. It's been installed. Great. Now what we need to do is we need to head on over to our application. So I have it here in Visual Studio Code, and I want to now go on ahead and create a requirements.txt file with all of my packages. So to do so, you need to head on over to your terminal, and you need to say pip freeze greater than requirements.txt, and that's going to freeze all of the necessary packages in a requirements.txt file for you. And if it was a success, it will usually indent to the next line. And we can now see in our application, in our base directory, we have a requirements.txt file, and these are the packages that I'm using here. So I'd recommend when you are deploying for the first time, make sure that your application is quite minimal and not heavy in terms of your packages and dependencies, etc. So just keep that in mind. So I have all of my requirements here, and most importantly, you want to ensure that you have GUnicorn in here as well. That's very important. Okay, so we've got that set up. Let's continue. Now, the next thing that I want us to do is I want us to prepare our static files. So in this application of mine here, I'll show you what I have. So if I go to my settings.py file, and let me scroll down, right to the bottom here, you can see here my static structure here. So I have my static URL as follows, which is, of course, /static/. I have my static files dirs here. So essentially what I'm telling Django is my static folder is in the base directory. So if we look in my project here, I'm telling Django, okay, look in the base directory, which is, of course, right here for the static folder, and that is right here, and to serve, of course, my static files from that particular directory, which has my CSS file and my JavaScript file in place here. So that's what I have in terms of the structure at this moment. But since we're preparing for deployment, I need to ensure that I collect all of said files in a static root directory. Now, we don't need to run python-manage.py collect static in the in the terminal yet. Okay, that will automatically be done for us when we actually deploy to DigitalOcean. So you don't need to do it here right now, but you do need to get that directory set up before you actually deploy to DigitalOcean. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and define the following, which is static_root equals, and what I prefer to do is use OS. So what you can say right at the top here of your settings.py file is you can just say import OS. So let's go ahead and scroll down. And there we are, static root. And we can just simply go ahead and say os.pass.join. and within your parentheses you want to set up the location of your static files, and this is going to include all of the behind the scenes files as well, so all of those that pertain also to the Django admin, so that is behind the scenes HTML and JavaScript code which we don't see that we need to collect in a directory. So we need to say base underscore dir, so we want it to be in our base directory, and then you can add in a comma, and then of course in the quotes here we can just go ahead and say static files, just like that, and that's going to ensure that everything is loaded in the static files directory. So Django will create a static files directory in our base directory, which will be right here, and that will consist of all of our current static files that we've created, so the custom CSS and JavaScript and the behind the scenes CSS and JavaScript in a static files directory. So that's why we need to do that. Now I always prefer to put in double quotes here, but you can use single quotes if you desire, so that's just kind of a bit of a preference here that I also wanted to mention here, so it's quite flexible in that regard. All right, perfect. So we've got that set up and ready to go. Now the next thing that I want us to do is I want us to start with our environment variables. So let's go ahead and scroll up, and in this application that I have here, what's sensitive is of course my secret key, and that will be the same for everything else. So what I always like to do, of course, first of all, is I just like to get a document here open. So I have a sensitive info notepad here, and I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, and then I like to just copy my secret key as is and paste that in, and we can we're going to insert this environment variable through the DigitalOcean platform later. But what you want to do now is you want to ensure that you have this secret key value here out of your code here. So we can just remove that, make sure that you stored it somewhere else, and we already have the OS module imported, so we can just go ahead and configure the structure for our environment variable as OS, and you want to say dot environ.get, and here in parentheses we're going to put secret underscore key. So we're going to essentially refer to the secret underscore key which we will define in DigitalOcean, and that's going to grab the value that's associated and assign it to the secret key variable here. So don't worry, I will explain this when we get to it. So that's how we can handle our environment variables, just like so, and you can apply that to any other use case that you have set up or anything of the like. Okay, next thing that we need to do, of course, is we need to set debug here to false. And for the time being, for allowed host, we want to ensure that we're able to connect to any of the instances running behind the scenes on DigitalOcean. So for now, we can just put in the star for allowed all hosts, but don't worry, I will show you how you can put in the default domain name which is generated for us automatically with DigitalOcean, and we'll just replace it there. So this is just temporary, so don't worry about that. Alright, so just make sure you've got everything configured, that you have installed gunicorn, you have your requirements.txt file in place, that you have gunicorn in your requirements.txt file, you set up your environment variable or variables for sensitive information in your application, and also that you have set up the structure here in terms of static root here, because all of our static files are going to be stored in this directory in static files, and that will be created when we actually deploy our application to DigitalOcean, so we don't need to run collect static itself. Okay, so make sure you've got all of that set up. Very important. Okay, so that's all for now here, and the next thing that we can go ahead and do is ensure that we have created a GitHub account. So as you can see here, I'm on the dashboard of my GitHub account here, so make sure that you have a GitHub account and that you have created one. I will be sure to attach the link to github.com in the description below, and all you need to do is sign up for a GitHub account. That's all you need to do. It's a very simple process, so make sure that you've created your GitHub account. Okay, right, once you've created your GitHub account, you can then go ahead and download and install Git. So we're going to utilize Git so we can push our source code from Visual Studio Code, as we can see, to GitHub itself. Right, so that's available at the following URL, so git-scm.com. I will put all of the links to what I referenced in this video in the description below, so you can head on straight there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to download the latest source release here. So I'm going to go ahead and say download for Windows. Okay, and then I'm going to set up a Git. Okay, so there are a few options here, but let's go ahead and choose the preferred option for most devices, should I say. Right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to choose a 64-bit Git for Windows setup. So what we can do is go ahead and click on that. It's going to download it for us. Okay, so it has been downloaded. Let's go ahead and open that up. And then we'll just go through the setup with it itself. Now your screen may dim for security warning, so you just need to say yes or enter in the permissions so that you can continue with the setup wizard. Okay, and let's get started. So we can say next. All right, the location next. Okay, I'm just going to override it there. I'm going to say next, next, next. Okay, we can just keep on going next here in the process. Okay, and very important here, when you are choosing a credential helper, make sure that you have the Git credential manager checked. Very important. I will explain in a moment as to why that's important, so just keep that in mind. All right, so we can say next and install. So it's going to take a moment here to install Git, so we're just going to have to be patient, and once it's been completed, we can then continue from that point onward. Alright, so welcome back. So as we can see here, Git has successfully been installed, and that's perfect for us. So what we can do is we can uncheck view release notes, and we can just say launch git bash and say finish. Right, here we are. So here is our git bash terminal. And all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to adjust the sizing here. And there we have it. Perfect. Okay, so before we go on ahead and push our application to GitHub, the next thing that we're going to want to do is we need to ensure that we have an access token. Okay, because we're going to create a private repository on GitHub. So let's go to GitHub. So make sure that you have created your GitHub account by now, and if you have created it, you'll automatically be redirected to the GitHub dashboard on your GitHub account. Okay, so now what we can do is go to our profile. You can click on your profile picture essentially, and you can scroll down and click on settings. Okay, after doing so, on the left hand side, you want to scroll down again, right until you see developer settings then. So you want to click on the profile picture and then go to your settings, and then you want to scroll down on the left hand side to developer settings and click on that. Right, then you want to navigate to personal access tokens, and you can click on the drop down here, and you want to create a classic token. So you can click here on tokens classic, and you can go ahead and generate a new token. Okay, then we'll have another drop down, and you just want to generate a new token with the classic token for general use. Okay, and you may be prompted to enter in your password, so go ahead and do just that and confirm it. And now I'm just going to put in a note here just so I know what token this is for. So I always like to put in, let's say, Pat Digital Ocean X. Okay, then you can set the expiration period here. So I'll just say 7 days. And you want to define access for the personal access token. So I'd recommend selecting repo here for full control of your private repositories. That's what we need. And once you've done that, you can scroll all the way down. You don't need to check anything else and generate this token. Once you have generated this token, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and copy it and store it somewhere safely here. So I'm just going to store it here in my document here for now. So we need this because we're going to have a private repository. We want to make sure everything is as safe as possible. Okay, so we have that set. Perfect. So what we can do now is we can just click on the following here on the left hand side and click on home. And that will take us back to the dashboard. Perfect. So make sure that you have generated that token. Perfect. Okay, so let's continue. We can head on back to our application. All right, and what we want to do now is we just want to start to initialize everything in order. So let's take a rundown. So make sure you have a requirements.txt file, and make sure that you have defined your environment variables, and again that you've defined your static settings here accordingly. Okay, so just make sure you've done that. Additionally, make sure that you've got your debug to false, and for now, allowed host can be all hosts with the asterisk, just for now. Okay, perfect. So we've got that set up now. We can go ahead and set up our repository. So I'm going to say create repository in GitHub. And we can give it a name here. So I'm going to just say dev, just an example. And the description here, I'm going to say sample application. I'm going to mark it as a private repository. I'm going to add a README file, and I'm just going to say create repository. Right, there we go. So our repository was created. Perfect. So we've done that. All right, great. So now we can go ahead and push our application to GitHub. Right, so what we want to do is we want to get into the directory of our project. So I'm going to show you how mine is structured just for clarity. So as you can see, I have a folder here called Project CRM on my desktop. So if I open Project CRM, okay, you're going to see here that I have my virtual environment folder outside, and CRM, if I open that up, it's going to show my Django project here. So we can see that sort of styling. So desktop project-CRM, CRM. So that is my directory structure. So if I were to head on over to Git Bash here, I need to go to that folder. So first I need to say cd, and I'm going to say desktop, enter. So now I'm on my desktop. Now I want to go to project CRM. So I'm going to say cd project-CRM, enter. Now I'm in the desktop in the project CRM folder. And then, okay, I am currently right here. Then I want to go into CRM. So I'm going to say cd, and cd means change directory, which essentially is a folder. And I'm going to say cd CRM, enter. And here I'm within my Django project now. So if I were to go into that, I can now see I have the following files and folders. Okay, so that is how you can just navigate your way around accordingly. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and clear this up. So you can just say clear, and that will clear everything up for you. And we want to, first of all, initialize our repository, our GitHub repository for this particular project. So I'm going to say git init. Okay, so it's initialized an empty Git repository for us. Perfect. Then I want to say git add, and I'm going to say space dot. So that's going to add everything, all of the files, and prepare all of that for pushing to GitHub. So I'm going to say git add. So that's going to add all of our files. There we go. All right, and then I just want to say clear again because this is a lot of text here. Okay, and then I want to commit my source code. So I'm going to say git commit. I'm going to say -m for message. And here I'm going to say first commit. And that's going to commit that code. There we go. So it's committed all of our code accordingly. And we can clear this up again. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're pushing this code to the main branch. So if we look at GitHub here, we have our main branch. So I'm going to push everything to the main branch here in my dev repository. So let's do it here. So first we want to say git branch -m. So it's going to be on the main branch. So I'm going to make it as follows. So as you can see, I was in master, but now I've moved it to main just for clarity here. And then we want to add our origin. So we're going to refer to where we're going to be pushing this source code to. So we can say git remote add origin. And what you want to do then is we can just minimize this, copy your repository, the URL here, as you are within it. So I'm in dev. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to paste that in. So I now have this URL, and you just want to make a slight modification and say .git at the end of it. Okay, so you want to add in that URL for your repository where you want to push your source code to, and just add .git at the end, press enter. And now we want to push all of our code. Now keep in handy now this personal access token because you are going to need it, so just keep that in mind. So we need to say git push, but what we need to do is we need to push this to our main branch. So we're going to say -u, the origin will be the main branch, that's where to, but this isn't always going to be enough. Sometimes you need to actually force the push. So you're going to want to put a space and say --force. And then you want to press enter. So go ahead and do just that. And we just need to be a bit patient here. It's going to, of course, prompt the credentials manager for Git. Here it is, and we can open this up. And you want to sign into GitHub with your token. So you can click on that, then get the token that you created earlier. You can copy that. And you just want to paste that in and say sign in. And that's going to push your code to GitHub after it's authenticated. And there we go, it's all been pushed. Perfect. Great, so let's clear this up. And there we go. Now what you can do is you can refresh here your GitHub repository. And here we can see all of our code has been pushed. All right, perfect. So well done, you've successfully pushed your application to GitHub. Right, let's continue. So now we want to deploy to DigitalOcean. Okay, so I am now assuming that you have created your DigitalOcean account. If you haven't, now's the time. So you want to go ahead and sign up with Google, GitHub, or with your email. Then of course, like I said, there will be a few things that you need to set up, like of course, you do need to add in a payment method here, so do keep that in mind. What's going to happen is, usually with DigitalOcean, it's going to take $1 off your payment method, and then it's going to reimburse you to see if it's a working credit card usually, and that will allow you to successfully complete the creation of your GitHub, of your DigitalOcean account, excuse me. So do keep that in mind. All right, great. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to head on over to the following URL here. So once you are signed into the DigitalOcean dashboard, you want to add in, you want to go to this URL, which of course is cloud.digitalocean.com/apps. Okay, you want to go to this particular URL, which I will put in the description of this video. And that's going to take you to a page that looks like this, and you'll see on the left hand side a few options that you can navigate between, and you'll see here you'll be on the app platform. So we're going to be using the app platform to deploy a Django application and not a droplet. So do keep that in mind. An app platform makes it a lot easier and simpler than a droplet. We don't need to go ahead and perform server infrastructure or anything of the like. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's start off with the deployment process now. Okay, so we can get started by utilizing resources from a source code provider. So we can see we have GitHub here, and we can say create app. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, then we need to, of course, set up our source provider here. So as you can see, we've got GitHub set up. Now, of course, if you have a different provider, you can go ahead and change it as you can see fit here. Right, so let's go ahead and continue with the process. So make sure that you've selected your designated service provider. Then we can scroll down, and we want to manage access here. So we don't have any access to our GitHub repositories from DigitalOcean. So we can just say manage access. And then we want to install and authorize DigitalOcean. And here it has a setting for these repositories. So I'd recommend you say only select repositories and to select your given repository. So this is the one we've been working with. So I'm going to select that one here. So my dev repository. Then we can go ahead and scroll down and say install and authorize this. So we want to make sure that we do that. Okay, so it's going to take a moment. Okay, and now we can scroll down again. And you'll now see that we can now go ahead and invoke that particular repository. And let's just confirm. So we will be working with the main branch in the base directory as follows. And we also have an auto deploy setting here. So every time there's an update that's made to the branch, our application will be redeployed. So let's go ahead then and say next. Okay. So as we can see here, here are our resources. So we'll have our app as follows. So don't worry, we can rename these. So first we have our web service here, which is essentially going to host our actual Django application. So let's go ahead and say edit. And first of all, let's change the name here. So I'm going to say edit, and I'm going to call this Django-app and say save. Then under the resource type here, we can see we're using a web service, which is going to be Python based. Under the resource size, we want to make this cheaper. So instead of $12 a month, let's say edit. And let's set this to $5. So that's the cheapest we can get with the following resources, which include 512 megabyte of RAM, 1 vCPU, and 50 gig of bandwidth. Okay, so we've got that set, and we can say save. Here is the build phase that we'll see. So first step is the Python build pack, then the proc file build pack, and then our custom build command build pack. Next, you'll see the run command here. Now this is going to be really important here. So we can see if already added in Gunicorn for us and the default run command here. Now this will appear only if you have installed Gunicorn and you have essentially added it into your requirements.txt file. But we do need to make an adjustment to what we have here. So you can say edit, and here at the end you want to add in your project's WSGI path. So what you can do essentially is you can head on over to your application, and I'm just going to navigate to the settings.py file. And what you want to do is you want to scroll down all the way to your WSGI setting, which I can see is right here. So as you can see, it is crm.wsgi for me here. So you want to adapt that to your own path here. So it's going to be your project name usually .wsgi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head on back here, and I'm just going to add a space and say crm.wsgi. Just like that, and that's going to run that command so that our Django application will be served on the DigitalOcean instances, or servers, you could say, virtual servers. And then we can just say save. Perfect. So we've got that set up. Make sure you've adjusted everything accordingly, and then we can move to the next step. Okay, perfect. So we've got all of those settings in place now, so we've set them all up, and we are good to go. So make sure you've set up the name, resource type, size, build phase, run command, ports, routes, and make sure you've had them all set up. Then you can just say back, and we've got them in place here. And now we can go to the next step, which is environment variables. So you can just say next. And for our environment variables, we're going to have a few components. This component that we're creating now is our web service. So we want to make sure it's global. So here under the environment variables, I'm going to say edit on the right hand side. And here is where we put in our key value pair. So the key here is essentially going to be the key we defined right here, which is going to be secret_key. And you just paste that in. And then the value here is, of course, what is your secret key for Django, and you want to put in whatever is within quotes. So I'm going to copy the following here within quotes and paste that in, and I'd recommend you say encrypt. Now I just want to mention here that secret key here is of course what we referenced right here by this particular variable. So secret_key is what is being looked for in our DigitalOcean environment. And what's going to happen is we're going to grab the value of the key here, which we defined in DigitalOcean, which is called secret key, and that value here is going to be assigned to this secret key variable. So that's how the process of environment variables work in this case. Right, perfect. So we've got that set. Make sure you encrypt it and say save. So we have one environment variable. Let's go to the next step. And now we can just edit the info. So first I want to change the app name here. So I'm going to say edit, and I'm going to call this Django-cluster as an example, and say save. Okay, you might need to say save again. And now the region, we can say edit. And you want to choose the region, and automatically it will select the region closest to you. So I'm going to adjust this as in any case. I'm going to choose London, and I'm going to say save, and we've got that in place. Then we can go to the next step, and just review everything. So make sure you're happy with the naming conventions, that you set up your environment variable, and that you have adjusted everything here accordingly. So in total, the monthly cost will be $5 a month. And let's create our resources now. So that's the next thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do. So let's say create resources. And our Django cluster has been created. Perfect. And we can see here that we pushed a deployment. We can also go ahead and view our build logs. So you can say go to build logs. And here it's going to take you to the activity. So you'll see all the logs appear here. It will take a moment until you can actually see it, but you'll see all the logs here. But we can see it's building that service. So we're going to just give it a moment, and then we'll access our application once it has essentially been deployed. So let's just go ahead and give that a minute. Also, it'll take a few moments. All right, so welcome back. So as we can see, our deployment went live, and we can now check out our app. So we can right click and say open a new tab. And there we have it. Our application has been deployed on DigitalOcean. Well done on getting to this point. Right, so as we can see, we can access our application perfectly fine. However, there is something amiss here. So my static files aren't rendering out correctly. And you'll also notice if you try to navigate to your admin, so /admin, you'll notice that that styling is really not good and it's completely gone. So we now need to configure our static files. So that's the next thing on the agenda. Now, of course, with static files, there's two ways that I'd recommend you do it. I would either recommend you go ahead and set this all up with white noise. If you're unsure of how to use white noise, I will be sure to add in a video in the description of this video that explains to you how you can use white noise. However, what I'm going to be showing you in this video is how you can set it up with DigitalOcean. I do like to keep things native and all in one place, so that's just a bit of a preference there, but you can decide how you feel. Right, so we can head on back. All right, perfect. So now let's go ahead and set up our static files. Now, what we would need to do is to create another component. So if we click on settings here and scroll down, you can see for our app, we have one component, which is a web service that we named Django app. We want to create another component that's going to deal with our static files. Okay, so we're going to have like a static site, sort of a CDN that's going to manage our static files for us. So what you can do now is you can just go ahead and say create, and we want to say create resources from the source code. We're going to use GitHub again. We're going to select that particular repository. We're going to keep the branch and the source directory as is, or to the deploy as it was, and we can say next. Okay. So here, okay, I want to rename the web service and edit it. So we're not going to use a web service. Now this management for static files is free, so you don't need to pay for anything. We can say edit. And the name, first of all, I'm going to call this Django-app-static. Say save. And the web service here is not going to be aware of it. The resource type here, if we say edit, is going to be a static site. So it's going to be a static website backed by a CDN. So we can say save, and you'll see that the pricing will be gone. We will have the same build phase as before. Now the output directory is important, so we're going to say edit here. So this is where all of our static files is going to be housed, especially those that pertain to the Django admin static files, so the behind the scenes CSS and JavaScript files for it. Now you can just navigate to your settings.py file, and if you scroll down, you'll see here that we have defined here in static root. If we zoom in here, we have static files. So this is what's going to be set as your output directory. And we didn't have to collect, we didn't need to run collect static in our application locally, because that was done in DigitalOcean itself. So here by the output directory, you want to say static files, and you want to then go ahead and say save. Then here by the request routes, you want to just simply go ahead and say edit. And the route here, we want to set this as static. Okay, and I'm going to explain why that is. So if we go to our application here, and let me just go on a random page. If I say right click and say view page source, We'll zoom in here so you can get the idea. So the expectation, for example, is looking for a styles.css page here. And if I click on this, it'll say not found. So the reason for that is to start off with, this /static route doesn't exist because we haven't even configured it. And that's why we're configuring in DigitalOcean the route here to /static so that it can essentially lead us to CSS and styles.css and all of our static files. So that is the reason for that. So we can route it correctly, essentially. So we can just go ahead and close this out. So that's the reason for that. Right, so you can say save. So again, just make sure you've added everything correctly, that you're using a static site that's going to be free. You've set the output directory to static files, and the route there that you set is /static. Okay, so if you got that all correct, you can just say back and make sure you've got that set up as your resource, and then you can say next. Under environment variables, we already have that configured at one environment variable as global, and all the resources will have access. So anything we create will have access to it. And we can then go ahead and say next. Right, so you can just review everything, make sure you've got the same as me. And as you can see, we're going to create this Django app static resource or component, and that's going to be free. So we can say create resources now. Right, that resource is going to be created. And we can just close that for now, and it's just going to take a moment. We can also see the logs. You can go to the build logs if you want to investigate the process. But what we're going to do for now is we're just going to wait for it to be completed. And if you scroll down, we can see we have two components, the Django app, which hosts our actual application, and this Django app static, which is like a static website that will host our static files that we're referencing to and integrating with our Django app. So let's just wait for this process to be completed. Right, so welcome back. So as we can see, the deployment was a success, and all you need to do is revisit your application at the URL and just refresh. And now let me test out my application. Now I can see there is a difference in the sizing, for example, in my own application. So this means that my CSS has been applied and my JavaScript. But for all of us, so let's go to admin, so /admin. And here you should see the regular Django admin. And this is the indication now that our static files have been integrated. So we've configured them. So let me just right click and say view page source. And let me choose one of these routes. And if I click on it, you can see now that I'm now able to access this page, and it's now running perfectly as it should. So that is essentially how you can go ahead and configure your static files. So I'm just going to head on to the home page, and there we go. Perfect. So that's how you can configure your static files. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is how we can go on ahead and update our code. So a good test of this is going to be to change the allowed host settings. So if I go to the top, we can see allowed hosts is to all hosts, okay? So for safety, we want to put in just one domain, which is essentially going to be this one right here. So what I recommend you do is just copy this URL that you have for your project, navigate to your settings.py file here, and under allowed hosts, you want to paste that in and just keep the domain in there. So you can just remove all the slashes and the HTTPS scheme, and you just want to have an allowed host, your actual domain name that's generated for you by DigitalOcean. After you've done that, what you can do is you can make these changes by heading over to git bash, and you can just say git add dot, and then you want to, of course, go ahead and commit. So here I'm just going to say update. So git commit -m to say make, and then update here for the message. And then we can just say git push, and you want to add in the code that we had before. So git push -u origin on the main branch, and we want to force this. So you'll see that update will go into place. There we go. And now you can just reference, of course, DigitalOcean now, and you'll see it'll have an auto deployment message. And there we go, it's being rebuilt. And I also want to mention you can also do this manually. If you go to actions, you can, of course, say deploy, force rebuild, and deploy. So you do have that option to manually do it as well. So do keep that in mind as you're working on this. So that's how you can go ahead and set that up. So I just want to clear this for now. And there we go. Okay, so that's just going to go ahead and update. So let's go ahead and wait for that. And that is how we can just ensure that we have allowed hosts in a safer stance. Right, so welcome back. Now, sometimes what does happen is you would need to just refresh the page because sometimes it takes quite a long time for that success message to appear. And in the event it doesn't appear, what you can do is just refresh your page. After some time, if it takes a bit of time to load up and everything, and you can just go ahead and look at the activity, and that's just going to show the latest developments that you had and if everything was a success. So do keep that in mind here. You can also see here under the activity phase. But anyway, let's head on to our application now and refresh. And we can see we've still got that static part in place, and our application is still working after that update we made to our load host settings. Perfect. Okay, so that is essentially how you can deploy your Django application to DigitalOcean and how you can configure your static files as well. The next part that I'm going to show you is how you can configure a production database or a Postgres database to DigitalOcean. It will cost a bit more than the actual deployment for the web service, but I'm going to show you anyway for those interested. So what you would need to do is you can just go to settings. So we have our web service, we have our static files CDN, you could say. Now we want to say create, and we want to attach a database now. So we can say create attach database. Okay, let's just give it a moment, and we're going to create a new database. It's going to use Postgres by default. You can change the database name here as you desire. And we can just go ahead and say create database. So you just keep in mind the cost here for it. So it's created. Now, not to worry, all the resources we create here, if you're following along, we will delete at the end. So don't worry about that. So our database has been created. Now, this usually takes a bit of time here. So what I recommend you do is just be patient. And in the meantime, you can scroll down, click on DB. And you'll see if you scroll down here, you'll see the connection details. So you'll see here under this section of connection details, it will show more information in terms of how you can connect to your database. So do keep that in mind. It will populate automatically once the database has been created here. Now this usually takes about, I'd say 10-15 minutes at least, maybe longer. So you're just going to have to be patient as this gets created. And then we'll continue with how we would configure our production database with our Django application and host it on DigitalOcean. All right, so welcome back. So as you can see now, our deployment went live in terms of our database. So it has been created. Perfect. So now if you scroll down your settings here, you should see that we have all of these details in terms of how to connect to it. So here are the connection parameters. And here is the connection string. So you can see that you have two options here which you can go ahead and test out between. Right, perfect. Now before we can go ahead and connect to this database, we need to go ahead and install a library known as psycopg2 binary. And this is a Python Postgres database adapter, so it will ensure that our Django application can connect to a Postgres database. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set up this configuration in our application right here in our settings.py file, and of course, install that package and refresh our requirements.txt file as well. And then we'll push it via git bash here. And of course, we will then go ahead and see that update in place. Now, before we do all of that, what I recommend you do is to save your connection string here for your database URL, and we'll then just create and set up our environment variable to ensure this is secure before we dive in. So under connection details, I'd recommend you choose connection string. We can copy the following. You can click on the icon. Let's head on to our sensitive document. And here I'm going to set my environment variable as database underscore URL equals, and I'll put in the value itself as such. So let's configure this in DigitalOcean. So I'll scroll up and we can close that, and we can click on actions, and we can go ahead and say manage env vars, which stands for environment variables. So we can click on that, and of course it can take us to this page. We can scroll up, and at the app level we can see we've configured one environment variable. So let's say edit, and we want to have the next environment variable available at build time and runtime. So we can see we have the secret key encrypted. Let's go ahead and set up the next one. So it will be our database URL. I'm going to use this as the key. So database URL, and the value here, I'll go ahead and copy the following and paste that in. And I'm also going to go ahead and encrypt that for protection. And we can go ahead and save it. Now remember this key here because we're going to reference it in our application here. So you can just say save. And there we go. So it's been updated. Now, what you may see happen is your application is going to rebuild itself, if you see up here, but don't worry about that. That's not the focus for now. So let's go ahead and set everything up. So we can go ahead and install this library. So let's go to our terminal here. And we can just say pip install psychopg2 binary. Right, there we go. And then you want to freeze that. So you can say pip freeze greater than requirements.txt. And we can navigate then to our requirements.txt file. And you should now see the psychopg2 binary library within your requirements.txt file. Very important that you have that in place. Great. Then in our settings.py file, let's go ahead and set up those configurations. So let's scroll down all the way to our database. So as of this moment on the default, we're using an SQLite database, which is good. You can technically just use this database with DigitalOcean to an extent, I believe. I think there's a limitation somewhere. I'm not too clued up, I will say, on that. But in any case, it would be better since you're in a production environment to have a production database, to be fair. Okay, so first of all, we want to comment this out. We don't want to use this database. And here I'm going to say Postgres. All right, and let's add some more space. All right, great. Right, so let's continue with the process. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up the environment variable here in our application. So I'm going to first of all create a variable called database_URL. I want to set it to os.environ.get. And remember, whatever you put in here needs to match whatever you set as the key in DigitalOcean. So in our case, it was database_URL as well. Right, so we want to make sure we have that. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go on ahead and essentially query the connection string that we get, which is our database URL value. And to do so, we need to use the URL parse function. So actually right above this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say from. You need to say from first. So from URL lib, so URL library dot parse, and we want to import the URL parse function. Okay. After doing so, we then want to set up another variable, which is going to store the values of our parsed database URL connection string. So I'm going to say db_info equals URL parse. And here in parentheses, we're going to get the value here of the connection string, so database URL. So we can go ahead and simply just paste that in. And we're good to go. Next, we want to set up our database engine mappings. So we can just use this commented out structure for our database dictionary here for our SQLite database, and we can just reformat it. And we're going to put that down here. Right, so the first thing here is the engine. Now we're going to use the Django.db.backends engine, but it's not going to be based on SQLite. It's going to be based on Postgres. So we'll put in Postgres like so, underscore psychopg2 like so. So make sure you go ahead and add that in. Next, under the name, it will be your database name. So in our case, it was just DB, if you recall from earlier. Then we're going to have user. So the user here, we're going to refer to the variable here, which was db_info. So we'll just go ahead and revert to that. So db_info dot, and it's going to have all of the values from this database URL, okay, and it's going to be sorted out since we are parsing it, and we can just refer to the attribute which is .username. And you want to make sure you put in a comma afterwards. Then of course we're going to have password. Okay, and that's going to be gb_info dot. We'll have password. Then we'll have host gb_info dot, and it will be called host name in this case. Then we'll have port, and that will be gb_info dot port. And then we'll have options. Okay, and that's going to be in, of course, in the following format. So the key value pair would be in the dictionary SSL mode, colon, and in quotes we'll say require. So we want to require it, and then add in a comma at the end. Right, so we've got all of that set up. So if I were to just zoom out for clarity here, so for a Postgres database, we need to make sure that we have the following in check here. So these are all the settings that we need to make sure that we have. So make sure you've got that in place here. So of course we want to import our URL parse function. We want to store the value that we of course have set here. Okay, that's going to be grabbed from the environment variable declared in DigitalOcean. The value is going to be grabbed and assigned to the database URL variable. We're then going to parse it with the URL parse function into db_info. Then we're going to set up our database markup and add in all the necessities in terms of what type of engine it will be, the database name, and then we're going to refer in kind of like an attribute kind of way to the information that's been parsed from the database URL to grab the username, the password, the host name, the port, and just to ensure that SSL is enabled and required. Right, so make sure you've got all of this into place, and then we can head on over to our git bash terminal, and we can say, of course, git add dot, press enter, and then of course we'll have git commit, so git commit -m, and then update we can say, and then of course we can just say git push -u origin main on force. So let's go ahead and push that change. There we go. That's been pushed. Now let's head on over to our DigitalOcean dashboard, and you'll see there we go, it automatically builds and pushes. So this is going to take a moment, so let's just give it some time, and then we'll continue with the process after that. All right, so welcome back. So we can see it was a success, and now let's head on to our application. Let's make sure if we refresh, there's no breaking issues, and we're looking good. All right, great. Okay, so let's head on back and let's actually test that our database is actually connected. So what you can do, you can close this. You can click on console here, and what I'm going to do is actually just zoom in a tad bit. And here what you want to do is you just want to run Python manage.py, and you want to say run server. And you should see the migration warning here if our connection was a success. There we go. So this is a good indication that you're now connected to your production database. So essentially what you would do now is you would migrate your database, and something that a lot of people do get confused by that I want to just mention here is that if you have another database connected, the data that you had in your SQLite database isn't going to persist because this is a new database, new data. Now there are ways in which you can load data from your local database, so for example your SQLite database to your production database. There are ways to do that. Ironically, I have a video on how to do so. I'll also add that in the description below, but I just want to mention that so you understand that. Okay, so let's just make the migrations and create a super user and just, test our application. So I'll stop the server now. You can press Control-C to do so. And let's run Python manage.py migrate. That's going to migrate all our default apps. There we go. That's good. Let's say clear. Let's create a super user now. So I'll say Python manage.py create super user. And we can just say Arno, skip, password, do it again. And there we go, super user created successfully. Perfect, let's test this out. So I just want to zoom out here a tad bit. Let's go to our project, just refresh, and let's go to admin, /admin, zoom in, and let's go ahead and enter in our credentials for our super user. Right, so let's log in. And you'll see now that everything is going to effectively be on a clean slate. So we can just go to our user model, and you'll see there'll only be one user. And I have a custom model here called customers, and I should have nothing there, but I can see that of course I have my super user, but I have no other records. So this is a good indication as well that everything is working as it should. So we can just navigate back to our domain. And there we are. Perfect. I'm just going to test out my application. I'd recommend you also test yours now. So I'm just going to do an example. I'm just going to say Toki and password. And create account. And log in. And there we go. I can log out now. All right, perfect. All right, so we can see everything's working nicely there. We can see our CSS, our JavaScript, our production database, and that's how you can go ahead and set that up as well. All right, so there you have it. That is how you can essentially go on ahead and deploy your Django application to DigitalOcean, so you can handle static files. That's how you can create a production database and how you can integrate all of that together. Now, the final thing I do want to go through is how you can add a custom domain name. So what you can do here on the left-hand side is you can scroll down and you can click on networking. So after you've clicked on networking, it will give you a few options which you can go through. So firewalls, PTR records, VPC, load balancers, reversed IPs. So I'd recommend you click on domains. And here we can see that we don't have domains, but you can enter one, assign it to your project here, and then add that domain. And of course, then after you've done that, you're going to just see your DNS records. You may need to configure a few of them, but after you've done that, very important, get your domain name after you've set it up here in DigitalOcean and connected it to your app. You want to get that, and you want to add it then to your list of allowed hosts. So here you can see we have this default domain name generated by DigitalOcean for us. You can replace that and then instead go ahead and add in your new domain name instead, or you can add it together. It's your choice. That's just some guidance for you on how you can add in a custom domain name and the steps that you would take. Right, so let's head on back to App Platform here on the left-hand side. So that's where we've been creating everything. We've been using App Platform. And we can click here on it called Django cluster. You can see the resources or components with it. So one service, that's the web service, the web app, the static site for our static files. And if we click on the plus one, that's our database. So that's our resources or components for Django cluster, you could say is the name that we've set up. All right, so that's it for this video. Of course, now I'm going to show you how you can delete your resources. So let's do that. So we can go to settings and let's delete them independently. So first, database. Let's click on DB. Scroll down and say destroy database. Copy that and enter it and say destroy. Database has been removed. Perfect. You can see here in settings, okay, we've got the static now. So the static site, let's click on that. Scroll down. Destroy component. Copy that. Paste it in. Destroy. Done. Next, the Django app, so the web service itself. Click on that, scroll down, destroy component, copy that, paste it in, destroy. Perfect, Django has been removed. Now let's delete the cluster. You can go to actions and you can just say destroy app, copy that, paste that in and destroy. And there we go, the Django cluster has been deleted, and that is everything all deleted as well in terms of the resource cleanup. All right, guys, so that is it for this video tutorial on deploying a Django app to DigitalOcean. So it was quite a long one, but I wanted to include everything and to explain everything as best as I could. So of course, all the things that I mentioned in terms of links, I will be sure to add that to the description, including the 2 extra videos, and of course, all of the links that we've been using. Right guys, so that's it for this video, and as always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.